I was standing in my mother's hospital room when my phone exploded with messages. Not the gentle ping of condolences or the soft buzz of concerned relatives checking in. No, this was different. This was the relentless vibration of a reputation being destroyed in real time, one text message at a time. My mother had passed away 3 hours earlier. 3 hours. I hadn't even left the hospital yet. The nurses were still removing equipment, preparing her body for transport. I was still holding the hand that had raised me, fed me, taught me right from wrong, the hand that had gone cold while I whispered my final goodbyes. And my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. The first message was from my cousin Jennifer. Is it true what Rebecca's saying? The second was from Uncle Paul. I can't believe you would do something like this. The third was from my Aunt Maria. Your mother didn't raise you to be a thief. How could you? Thief. The word appeared again and again, growing bolder with each message, transforming from accusation to accepted fact in the space of minutes. I didn't understand. I had been at the hospital for 16 hours straight, watching my mother's breathing slow, her consciousness fade, holding vigil as cancer finally claimed the strongest woman I had ever known. What could possibly have happened in those hours to turn me into a villain? Then came the message from my sister Rebecca. Don't bother coming to the funeral. Everyone knows what you did. My name is David Morrison, and this is the story of how my sister destroyed my reputation with a lie, turned my entire family against me, and how our mother, even in death, made sure the truth would be heard. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand what happened in that lawyer's office, you need to understand the relationship between Rebecca and me, the dynamics that shaped our family, and the crucial difference between the person everyone thought my sister was and the person she actually became. Before we get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe, and hit hype to boost this episode. Drop a comment below with your city or country. I'm always curious where viewers are joining from. Rebecca was born 3 years before me, and according to family legend, she arrived perfect. Beautiful, even as an infant, with enormous blue eyes and blonde curls that made strangers stop my parents on the street to compliment her. She was the kind of child who seemed to understand social dynamics instinctively, who knew exactly how to charm adults while terrorizing other children when no one was looking. I came along unplanned, unremarkable, and apparently unwanted, at least by Rebecca, who viewed my arrival as a personal insult. My earliest memories involve her pinching me when our parents weren't looking, telling me that I was adopted and unloved, destroying my toys, and then crying to our mother that I had broken them myself. Our mother, Elizabeth Morrison, tried to love us equally. She really did. But Rebecca had cultivated a special relationship with her, a bond built on carefully curated moments of vulnerability and connection that always seemed to happen when I wasn't around. Rebecca would save her tears, her confessions, her displays of daughterly devotion for private moments with Mom, leaving me to seem distant by comparison. By the time we were teenagers, the family dynamic was set. Rebecca was the golden child, destined for greatness, while I was the steady, reliable one who would probably do fine but nothing spectacular. Rebecca got the praise, the attention, the benefit of every doubt. I got the expectations without the glory. Do well in school, but don't outshine your sister. Help around the house, but don't expect recognition. Be successful, but not so successful that it makes Rebecca look bad. I learned early to accept this arrangement. Fighting it only made things worse, only made me look jealous or petty. So I carved out my own path, one that didn't compete with Rebecca's spotlight. I went to state school instead of the private university she chose. I became an accountant instead of pursuing the law degree she eventually abandoned halfway through. I married Jen, a kindergarten teacher who came from a modest background, instead of hunting for someone with social connections like Rebecca did. Rebecca married Trevor Walsh 3 years after graduating college. Trevor came from money. Old money, the kind that came with a family name that opened doors and a trust fund that made working optional rather than necessary. The wedding was spectacular, covered by the local society pages, with Rebecca in a dress that cost more than my first car. She looked radiant, triumphant, like she had finally achieved the life she deserved. Our mother was thrilled. She saw Rebecca's marriage as validation that she had raised her daughter right, that all those years of piano lessons and etiquette classes and carefully managed social connections had paid off. My wedding, by contrast, was small, held in my wife's parents' backyard, attended mostly by friends rather than family. Rebecca came but spent most of the reception checking her phone and leaving early with a migraine. Mom came and smiled politely, but I could see the disappointment in her eyes. Disappointment that I hadn't aimed higher, chosen better, tried harder to be someone worth celebrating. For years, this was our equilibrium. Rebecca lived her glamorous life in the expensive suburb, working part-time at a boutique that one of Trevor's family friends owned, posting carefully filtered photos on social media of exotic vacations and charity galas. I lived in a modest 3-bedroom house 20 minutes from my accounting firm, spending weekends coaching my daughter's soccer team and helping Jen grade papers. We saw each other at holidays, maintained a polite but distant relationship, and largely stayed out of each other's way. I thought that was as good as it would get. I thought the dynamics established in childhood were permanent, unchangeable, the foundation upon which our family would always rest. I was wrong. The change began when Mom got sick. Not immediately, the diagnosis came first. Stage 3 breast cancer, treatable but serious. Mom handled it with characteristic strength, scheduling chemotherapy around her volunteer work at the church, wearing scarves and hats with the same dignity she wore everything else. Rebecca, predictably, made the illness about her. Every family gathering became a stage for her grief, her fear, her dramatic displays of daughterly devotion. She would arrive at Mom's house with expensive gifts, cashmere blankets, gourmet meal deliveries, designer loungewear, and make sure everyone saw them, knew about them, understood that she was the devoted daughter who spared no expense for her ailing mother. I, meanwhile, showed up with groceries and cleaning supplies. I mowed Mom's lawn. I drove her to appointments when Rebecca had unavoidable conflicts. I organized her medications, coordinated with her doctors, made sure her bills were paid on time. Boring, unglamorous work that no one photographed for Instagram, that generated no praise or recognition. Mom appreciated it, I think. At least she said she did during those quiet moments when it was just the two of us, when she was too tired for Rebecca's theatrical performances and just needed someone to sit with her while she rested. "You're a good son, David," she told me once, her hand fragile in mine. "You've always been steady, reliable. I know I don't say it enough, but I see you. I see what you do." Those words meant more to me than any inheritance ever could. They sustained me through the long months of treatment, through the brief, beautiful remission, and then through the devastating return of cancer, this time in her liver, this time terminal. The final 6 months of Mom's life were brutal. The cancer spread aggressively, resistant to treatment, transforming my strong, independent mother into someone who needed help with everything. Rebecca's visits became less frequent, her dramatic displays replaced by excuses, Trevor's work obligations, social commitments she couldn't break, her own health issues brought on by the stress. I understood. Watching someone you love die slowly is exhausting, terrifying, heartbreaking. Not everyone has the capacity for it. But I stayed. Jen and I coordinated care with hospice, made sure Mom was never alone, held her hand through the worst of it. We arranged for her to die at home, in her own bed, surrounded by familiar things. It's what she wanted. In those final weeks, Mom started putting her affairs in order. She met with her lawyer, Thomas Hendricks, a man she had known for 30 years and trusted completely. She updated her will, organized her financial documents, and made arrangements for her funeral. And she wrote letters. Several of them sealed in envelopes with specific instructions about when they should be opened. I didn't know what was in those letters. She never told me, but I saw her laboring over them in the evenings when the pain medication made her mind clear but her body weak, her hands shaking as she wrote, tears occasionally falling onto the paper. "Are you okay, Mom?" I asked once, finding her crying over a half-written letter. "I'm making sure the truth is told," she said. "That's all, just making sure the truth is told." 3 days before she died, Mom had me move $50,000 from her savings account. It was a specific request, urgent despite her weakness. "The hospice equipment," she explained, her voice barely above a whisper. "The specialized bed, the oxygen concentrator, the medication pumps. Insurance won't cover it all. I need you to make sure it's paid for." I handled it immediately, coordinating with the hospice agency, signing the payment authorization forms, making sure everything was documented properly. Mom was a stickler for proper documentation. She had worked as a paralegal before retiring and believed that everything important should be written down, witnessed, provable. "Keep all the receipts," she told me. "Keep everything, just in case." I didn't understand what just in case meant. I thought she was just being thorough, making sure there wouldn't be confusion after she was gone. I had no idea she was preparing for what Rebecca would do. Mom died on a Tuesday evening in late September. The weather was unreasonably beautiful. Golden sunset, gentle breeze, the kind of evening that made death feel like a cruel joke. How could the world be so lovely while the person who had given me life slipped away? I was alone with her at the end. Jen had gone home to get our daughter from school. Rebecca had texted that she would try to come by tomorrow. The hospice nurse, a kind woman named Sarah, had stepped out to give us privacy. Mom's breathing had been labored all day, the death rattle they warn you about, the sound that means the end is near. Then, around 7:15 p.m., she opened her eyes. Really opened them, with a clarity I hadn't seen in weeks. "David," she whispered. "I'm here, Mom." The truth always comes out. Always. Remember that. I will. She squeezed my hand with surprising strength. "I love you. You were exactly the son I needed." Then she closed her eyes, took 3 more shallow breaths, and was gone. I sat with her for a long time, holding her hand, feeling the warmth slowly leave her body, trying to memorize the shape of her face, the weight of her hand, all the little details that would fade with time. Sarah eventually came back, checked her vitals with professional efficiency, and made the necessary phone calls. I called Jen first. Then I called Rebecca. Rebecca didn't answer. I left a voicemail. "She's gone, Rebecca. Mom died about an hour ago. I'm still at the house. Call me when you get this." Then I called the rest of the family, aunts, uncles, cousins who needed to know. Everyone expressed shock, sadness, condolences. Everyone asked what they could do to help. I stayed at the house for hours, dealing with the funeral home, answering questions, beginning the overwhelming process of death administration. Around 11 p.m., exhausted and emotionally hollowed out, I finally went home. My phone had been mostly silent since I made those initial calls. People were giving me space, I assumed, letting me grieve. It wasn't until the next morning, Wednesday, that I checked my phone and discovered what Rebecca had done. The messages had started around 9 p.m. the previous night, just 2 hours after Mom died. Rebecca had posted in the family group chat, "I need everyone to know something important. I went through Mom's financial documents today, and there's $50,000 missing from her account, transferred out just days before she died. I think we all know who had access to her accounts. I think we all know who would do something like this." She didn't name me directly. She didn't have to. The responses came fast. Little Aunt Maria. "Oh my God. Are you serious?" Cousin Jennifer. "Who are you talking about?" Rebecca. "I don't want to say names publicly, but I think it's obvious. The person who was handling her finances, the person who claimed to be helping but was really just waiting for an opportunity." Uncle Paul. "This is a serious accusation, Rebecca. Do you have proof?" Rebecca. "The bank statement speaks for itself. $50,000 gone. Transferred out without proper authorization. I've already contacted the police." She had contacted the police about a legitimate transaction that I had made at our mother's explicit request, with full documentation for a legitimate medical expense. But Rebecca didn't mention that. She presented it as theft, as betrayal, as proof that her brother was a criminal who had stolen from their dying mother, and the family believed her. By Wednesday afternoon, I was persona non grata. Cousins blocked me on social media. Aunts and uncles stopped returning my calls. People who had hugged me at Mom's bedside now treated me like a pariah. I tried to explain. I called Rebecca directly, got her voicemail, left a message explaining about the hospice equipment, the receipts I had, the documentation Mom had insisted on maintaining. She texted back, "Save your lies for the police. Everyone knows what you did. You're not welcome at the funeral." I called Uncle Paul, the family patriarch, the person everyone respected. "Uncle Paul, you have to listen to me. Mom asked me to pay for her medical equipment. I have receipts. I have authorization forms. This is all a misunderstanding." "David," he said, his voice heavy with disappointment. "I've known you since you were born. I never thought you'd be capable of something like this. But the evidence is there. The money is gone. And Rebecca says, Rebecca is lying." Silence on the other end. Then, "That's a serious accusation. Rebecca has no reason to lie." "She has every reason. She always has. Uncle Paul, you've known us both our whole lives. You know our relationship. You know she's always needed to be the center of attention, the victim, the one everyone rallies around." "This isn't about childhood rivalries," he said coldly. "This is about theft. This is about stealing from a dying woman. I think you need to get a lawyer, David, and I think you need to stay away from this family until this is resolved." He hung up. I sat in my kitchen, staring at my phone, feeling the weight of injustice crushing down on me. I had spent 6 months caring for my mother. I had sacrificed time with my own family, neglected my work, exhausted myself emotionally and physically to make sure she didn't die alone, didn't suffer unnecessarily, didn't spend her final days in fear or pain. And this was my reward: accused of theft by my sister, abandoned by my family, excluded from my own mother's funeral. Jen found me there an hour later, still sitting at the kitchen table, too numb to even cry. "What are we going to do?" she asked, sitting down beside me, taking my hand. "We're going to wait," I said. We're going to wait for the truth to come out. What if it doesn't? I thought about Mom's final words. The truth always comes out. I thought about those sealed letters she had written, the ones she had given to her lawyer with specific instructions. I thought about my mother's fierce commitment to justice, her paralegal's obsession with documentation and proof. It will, I said. Mom will make sure it does. I just had no idea how devastating that truth would be. The funeral was scheduled for Saturday, 4 days after Mom died. 4 days that felt like 4 years, each one stretching out in an agony of isolation and helplessness as I watched my reputation disintegrate in real time. Rebecca had seized control of the funeral arrangements with the same aggressive efficiency she brought to everything that benefited her. She planned the service at St. Augustine's, the historic church where Mom had volunteered for 15 years, where every pew would be filled with people who knew our family, who had watched Rebecca and me grow up. I received no information about the arrangements, no call, no email, no inclusion in the planning. I learned about the time and location from Jen's mother, who had heard from a friend who attended the same church. "Are you going?" Jen asked me on Friday night, both of us knowing the answer but needing to say it out loud. "I have to," I said. She was my mother. Rebecca told everyone you're not welcome. I don't care what Rebecca told everyone. I'm going to say goodbye to my mother. But I was afraid, genuinely physically afraid in a way I hadn't been since childhood. Afraid of the confrontation, the public humiliation, the possibility that I would be physically removed from my own mother's funeral while hundreds of people watched and judged and confirmed Rebecca's narrative. Saturday morning arrived with the same cruel sunshine that had marked Mom's death. Jen helped me dress in my dark suit, knotted my tie when my hands shook too badly to do it myself, held me when the enormity of what I was about to face finally broke through my numbness. "We'll get through this," she whispered. "Whatever happens, we'll get through it." We arrived at St. Augustine's 30 minutes early. The parking lot was already half full, mourners arriving to pay respects to a woman who had touched many lives through her volunteer work and quiet kindness. I walked through those church doors, not knowing if I would be thrown out, if someone would call the police, if the entire congregation would turn against me. My heart hammered against my ribs. My mouth was dry. I felt like a criminal approaching judgment, even though I had done nothing wrong. The church was beautiful in that somber way Catholic churches manage, light filtering through stained glass, candles flickering near the altar, the scent of incense and flowers heavy in the air. Mom's casket sat at the front, closed, covered with a spray of white roses, her favorite. I wanted to go to her, to stand beside that casket and say a private goodbye, but I didn't dare. Not yet, not until I saw how the family would react to my presence. Jen and I took seats in the back row, trying to be invisible, trying not to provoke anyone. Around us, people filed in, dressed in black, speaking in hushed tones about what a wonderful woman Elizabeth Morrison had been. None of them looked at me. Some actively avoided looking at me, their eyes skipping over our pew as if we didn't exist. Then Rebecca arrived. She wore a designer black dress that probably cost thousands, her blonde hair styled perfectly, her makeup done to emphasize her grief without destroying her beauty. Trevor walked beside her, looking uncomfortable but supportive, his hand on the small of her back. Rebecca saw me immediately. Her entire body went rigid, her carefully composed expression cracking to reveal pure fury. She marched down the aisle toward us, her heels clicking sharply on the stone floor, creating a sound that drew everyone's attention. Conversation stopped, heads turned. The entire church watched as Rebecca approached my pew, her face twisted with rage and what I realized with sick certainty was performative grief. "How dare you?" she hissed, loud enough for the surrounding pews to hear. "How dare you show your face here after what you did? Rebecca, I have every right to be here. She was my mother, too." "She was your victim," Rebecca spat. "You stole from her. You took advantage of a dying woman. You're not welcome here. Leave, now." Murmurs rippled through the church. People were staring openly now, some with sympathy for Rebecca, some with confusion, a few with what might have been skepticism. "I'm not leaving," I said quietly. "I came to say goodbye to Mom." "You came to ease your guilty conscience. Well, it won't work. Everyone here knows what you are. Everyone knows you're a thief who stole from his own mother." Trevor appeared at her elbow, whispering urgently, "Rebecca, not here, not now. This isn't the place." She shook him off. "This is exactly the place. I want everyone to see what he is. I want everyone to know that while Mom was dying, while I was taking care of her—" "You weren't taking care of her," I interrupted, my voice still quiet but carrying clearly in the silent church. "I was, for 6 months, every day." "Where were you, Rebecca? Where were you when she needed help bathing? When she needed someone to hold the basin while she vomited from chemo? Where were you during the 3 a.m. calls when she was scared and confused from the medication? Rebecca's face flushed red. I was dealing with my own grief. I was trying to process. You were posting Instagram photos from charity galas and spa weekends while I was watching our mother die. The church was absolutely silent now. Even the priest, Father Michael, who had been preparing at the altar, had stopped to watch this confrontation. How dare you, Rebecca breathed. How dare you try to make yourself look like the hero when you stole $50,000 from her, when you waited until she was too weak to stop you and then robbed her blind. I didn't steal anything. Mom asked me to pay for her hospice equipment. I have documentation, I have receipts, I have authorization forms with her signature. Everything was legitimate. Liar, Rebecca's voice echoed through the vaulted ceiling. You're a liar and a thief, and you're not welcome at our mother's funeral. Father Michael approached, his face troubled, his hands raised in a placating gesture. Please, both of you, this is a house of God and a place of mourning. Whatever conflict exists between you needs to be set aside for today. Mrs. Morrison deserves a peaceful farewell. She deserves justice, Rebecca declared. She deserves to have her son held accountable for what he did. And she'll get it, I said, looking directly at my sister. The truth always comes out. That's what she told me right before she died. The truth always comes out. She knew what you would do, Rebecca. She knew you'd lie, and she prepared for it. Rebecca's eyes narrowed. What's that supposed to mean? You'll see. Father Michael cleared his throat. Mr. Morrison, perhaps it would be best if you sat in a different section, just to avoid further conflict. It wasn't fair. None of it was fair. But I nodded, taking Jen's hand, preparing to move. Then Uncle Paul stood up from his seat in the third row. Actually, Father, I think David should leave entirely. The family has discussed this, and we all agree that he shouldn't be here. My Aunt Maria nodded vigorously. It's inappropriate, given the circumstances. What circumstances? I asked, my voice finally rising. What circumstances except my sister's lies? Has anyone asked to see my documentation? Has anyone asked for my side of the story? Or did you all just accept Rebecca's word without question because that's what this family has always done? Silence. Uncomfortable, guilty silence from people who knew, deep down, that I was right, but were too invested in Rebecca's narrative to admit it. I think you should leave, Uncle Paul repeated, his voice hard. You're not welcome here. I looked at Jen. Her eyes were filled with tears, her hand squeezing mine so tightly it hurt. I looked at the casket where my mother lay, the woman who had raised me, who had told me I was exactly the son she needed, and I thought about what she would want me to do. I'll leave, I said quietly. But not because I did anything wrong, not because I'm ashamed or guilty. I'll leave because I won't have my mother's funeral turned into a spectacle. I won't have her memory tainted by this conflict. I stood, Jen rising with me, our hands still clasped together. But I want everyone here to know something, I continued, my voice carrying through the church. I loved our mother. I cared for her when no one else would. I made sure she didn't die alone or in pain. And when the truth comes out, and it will come out, I hope you all remember this moment. I hope you remember how quick you were to believe lies and how slow you were to seek truth. I walked out of that church with my head held high, even though I wanted to collapse. I walked past the staring congregation, past Rebecca's triumphant smirk, past the family that had abandoned me, and out into the sunny parking lot where my mother's death felt unreal and the injustice felt like drowning. Jen drove us home. I sat in the passenger seat, too emotionally exhausted to do anything but stare out the window as we passed the familiar streets of my childhood, the neighborhood where Mom had raised us, the park where Rebecca and I had played before she decided I was her enemy. I can't believe they did that, Jen said, her voice shaking with anger. I can't believe your own family would treat you like that without even asking questions. Rebecca's always been convincing, I said dully. She's had 40 years of practice. But your mother knew, right? That's what you meant when you said she prepared for this. She wrote letters, sealed instructions for her lawyer. She knew Rebecca would pull something, and she made sure the truth would come out. When? At the will reading, Monday afternoon. 3 more days. 3 more days of living under suspicion, of being treated like a criminal by my own family, of watching my sister play the grieving daughter while she destroyed my reputation. 3 more days, and then Mom's final truth would be revealed. I just hoped I had the strength to make it that long. Thomas Hendricks's law office was located in a restored Victorian house near the downtown district, the kind of place that screamed old money respectability and professional discretion. I had been there once before, years ago, when Mom first set up her will. Back then, everything had been simple. Split the estate evenly between her 2 children, make sure there were provisions for specific sentimental items, done. I wondered how much of that had changed. The reading was scheduled for Monday at 2 p.m. I arrived 15 minutes early, parking across the street, watching through my windshield as other family members trickled in. Rebecca arrived first, of course. Trevor beside her, both dressed in expensive business attire that suggested they were attending a corporate merger rather than a will reading. Uncle Paul came next, then Aunt Maria and her husband Frank. Several cousins I recognized from holiday gatherings. A few of Mom's close friends from church. Everyone who had been carefully selected to witness what Rebecca clearly expected to be her triumph. I waited until 1:58 to cross the street and enter the office. Let them think I was afraid. Let them think I was trying to sneak in at the last minute. I didn't care anymore. I was there for one reason, to hear what my mother wanted to say. The receptionist, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, looked up as I entered. "Mr. Morrison?" "Yes." "They're gathering in the conference room. Second door on your right." I walked down the hallway, past framed law degrees and photos of Thomas Hendricks with various local dignitaries, and pushed open the conference room door. The conversation stopped instantly. 12 people turned to stare at me with expressions ranging from disgust to pity to cold hostility. Rebecca stood near the head of the table, her hand resting possessively on a leather folder that probably contained documents related to Mom's estate. When she saw me, her face transformed into theatrical shock. "What is he doing here?" she demanded, looking at Thomas Hendricks, who sat at the head of the table organizing papers. "Thomas, I specifically said he wasn't welcome at this reading." Thomas, a distinguished man in his 60s with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses, looked up with professional calm. "Mrs. Walsh, the will specifically requires that both of Mrs. Morrison's children be present for the reading. I have no legal basis to exclude him." "He's a thief. He stole from our mother." "That's an accusation, not a conviction," Thomas said mildly. "And unless you can provide proof that he's been legally barred from attending, I'm required to include him." I took a seat at the far end of the table, as far from Rebecca as possible. Jen sat beside me, her presence the only thing keeping me grounded. Around the table, relatives shifted uncomfortably, some looking at me with barely concealed contempt, others simply avoiding eye contact. Thomas cleared his throat. "Now that everyone is here, let's begin. First, let me express my condolences to the Morrison family. Elizabeth was a remarkable woman, and I was privileged to be her attorney and friend for over 3 decades. Murmurs of agreement around the table. Rebecca dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, though I noticed they were perfectly dry. "Mrs. Morrison's estate is relatively straightforward," Thomas continued, opening a leather-bound folder. "The primary assets consist of her home, currently valued at approximately $450,000, her savings and investment accounts totaling approximately $280,000, and various personal effects including jewelry, furniture, and collectibles." Rebecca leaned forward intently, her calculator mind already tallying numbers, dividing assets, planning how she would liquidate and distribute everything to maximize her benefit. "The will was last updated 3 weeks before Mrs. Morrison's death," Thomas said, and something in his tone made everyone pay closer attention. "She was very specific about her wishes and very clear that certain instructions were to be followed exactly." He pulled out a document, several pages stapled together, and began to read in his lawyer's monotone. "I, Elizabeth Ann Morrison, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament, revoking all previous wills and codicils." Standard opening language. Nothing unusual, Rebecca relaxed slightly. "To my beloved daughter, Rebecca Walsh, I leave my pearl necklace, the one given to me by my mother, and my complete collection of first edition Jane Austen novels." Rebecca smiled. The pearl necklace was worth at least $15,000, and the book collection was equally valuable, but they were clearly the appetizers, the small sentimental items given before the main estate distribution. "Oh, to my beloved son, David Morrison, I leave my wedding ring, the photo albums documenting our family history, and my grandmother's quilt." Sentimental items. Equal value, roughly. So far, everything seemed balanced, fair, exactly what you'd expect from a mother trying to treat her children equally. Then Thomas paused. He reached into his folder and pulled out a yellow envelope, aged and sealed with wax, my mother's handwriting across the front, "To be opened only in the presence of all family members." Rebecca sat up straighter, her smile fading. "What's that?" "This," Thomas said, "is a sealed letter that Mrs. Morrison gave me 6 days before her death. She was very explicit about when and how it should be read. Quote, 'This letter must be read aloud, in its entirety, before any further distribution of assets is discussed. No exceptions.' End quote." "Just open it," Rebecca said impatiently. It's probably just some sentimental goodbye message. Thomas carefully broke the seal. The envelope contained several pages of Mom's distinctive handwriting, neat and precise, despite the weakness she must have felt while writing it. He unfolded the pages, adjusted his glasses, and began to read. My dearest children, Rebecca and David. If you're hearing this letter, then I've passed on, and you're gathered to divide the material remnants of my life. Before we discuss money and property, I need to address something that I fear will have already caused significant damage to our family. Rebecca, I love you. I have always loved you, but I need to tell you some difficult truths that I lacked the courage to say to your face while I was alive. Around the table, people exchanged confused glances. This wasn't the sentimental goodbye they'd expected. Thomas continued reading, his voice steady. You have always been my beautiful, charismatic daughter. The one who could charm anyone, convince anyone, manipulate anyone. Yes, manipulate. I'm not blind to what you are, Rebecca, even though I often pretended to be. I saw how you treated your brother growing up. I saw the cruelty disguised as sibling rivalry. I saw how you turned everything into a competition, how you needed to win at all costs, how you couldn't stand for David to have anything, attention, praise, love, without you claiming it was somehow stolen from you. Rebecca had gone pale. Mom wouldn't, she didn't. Please don't interrupt, Thomas said firmly and continued reading. I enabled this behavior. I see that now. I made excuses for you, believed your version of events even when evidence suggested otherwise, gave you the benefit of every doubt while holding David to impossible standards. I convinced myself I was being fair when I was actually being unjust. And for that, David, I apologize. You deserved better from me. My throat tightened. Around the table, relatives were starting to look uncomfortable, beginning to realize this wasn't going to be the simple will reading they'd anticipated. 3 weeks ago, I asked David to transfer $50,000 from my account to pay for hospice equipment. I needed specialized medical devices that insurance wouldn't cover, and I needed them immediately. David handled everything perfectly. He got authorization forms, maintained receipts, documented everything with the thoroughness I taught him when he used to help me at the law office. I specifically instructed him to keep all records, and I witnessed the bank transfer myself. This was a legitimate medical expense, fully authorized, completely legal. Rebecca's hand flew to her mouth. The color had drained from her face entirely. Thomas kept reading, relentless. I knew what you would do, Rebecca. I knew that when you saw that missing money, you would immediately assume the worst about your brother. I knew you would accuse him without asking questions, without seeking evidence, without considering that there might be a legitimate explanation. I knew this because it's what you've always done, turned every situation into proof of David's inadequacy or wrongdoing. Stop, Rebecca whispered. Please stop. But Thomas didn't stop. He couldn't. Mom's instructions had been explicit. So I prepared for your accusation. I gave David copies of all documentation. I filed copies with my lawyer. I even recorded a video, currently in Mr. Hendricks's possession, showing me clearly stating my instructions for the money transfer and my authorization for David to handle my medical expenses. There is no ambiguity here, Rebecca. No room for misinterpretation. David did nothing wrong. He did exactly what I asked him to do. The conference room was absolutely silent except for Thomas's voice, steady and implacable, delivering my mother's posthumous judgment. And yet I know that you've accused him anyway. I know you've turned the family against him. I know you've made him seem like a villain while positioning yourself as the grieving daughter who just wants justice. I know all of this because I know you, Rebecca. I know how you think, how you operate, how you need to be the victim and the hero simultaneously. Rebecca was crying now, but these weren't her performative tears. These were tears of genuine shock and shame, of having your mother strip away every pretense and expose you for exactly what you are. The truth is this. David has been a better child to me than you have, Rebecca, not because he's more successful or impressive or charismatic, but because he showed up, he stayed, he put my needs ahead of his comfort. While you were posting sympathy-seeking messages on social media, David was holding my hair back while I vomited. While you were attending charity galas and calling it coping with grief, David was sleeping in the chair beside my bed in case I needed help in the middle of the night. While you were buying expensive gifts that required no actual sacrifice or effort, David was sacrificing his time, his energy, his emotional well-being to make sure I didn't die alone and afraid. Uncle Paul shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Aunt Maria wouldn't look at either Rebecca or me. The cousins stared at the table, finally confronting the reality they had chosen to ignore. I want to be clear about something, Mom's letter continued through Thomas's reading. I don't blame Rebecca for being who she is. I blame myself for enabling her to become this person. I blame myself for not standing up to her cruelty earlier, for not forcing her to confront her jealousy and need for control. I thought I was being a good mother by accepting her as she was. Instead, I was being a cowardly one. Thomas paused, took a sip of water, then continued with the final section of the letter. Because of my failure as a parent, because of my inability to teach Rebecca the values she needed to learn, I am making the following changes to my will. I do this not out of spite or revenge, but out of a final, desperate attempt to teach her a lesson I should have taught 30 years ago. Actions have consequences, and lies destroy trust, and cruelty, even when disguised as righteousness, is still cruelty. Rebecca made a choking sound. Trevor put his hand on her shoulder, but she shoved him away. Thomas read the final paragraph. To Rebecca Walsh. You get the pearl necklace and the book collection as originally stated, plus $1, nothing more. To David Morrison, you receive the entirety of my remaining estate, my home, my savings, my investments, all personal effects not specifically bequeathed to Rebecca. Use it wisely, use it well, and know that you were exactly the son I needed, especially at the end. The one who lied gets nothing. The one who stayed gets everything. Thomas set down the letter. The silence that followed was absolute, crushing, the weight of my mother's judgment pressing down on everyone in that room. Rebecca stood up so abruptly her chair fell backward with a crash that made everyone jump. No, she said, her voice breaking. No, she wouldn't do this. She loved me. She wouldn't cut me out like this for a misunderstanding. It wasn't a misunderstanding, I said quietly. You didn't misunderstand anything, Rebecca. You chose to believe I was a thief because it fit your narrative. You chose to destroy my reputation because it made you feel superior. You chose cruelty over compassion, lies over truth. And Mom knew you would. That's why she prepared for it. You poisoned her against me, Rebecca screamed. You manipulated her while she was weak and dying. You turned her against her own daughter. I didn't have to, I replied. You did that yourself. Thomas pulled out another document. I have here a video recording, dated 3 weeks before Mrs. Morrison's death, in which she clearly states her wishes and her reasoning. She made this recording specifically to prevent accusations of coercion or manipulation. Would you like to see it? Yes, Rebecca shouted. Yes, I want to see my mother explain how she could abandon me like this. Thomas set up a laptop, positioned it so everyone could see the screen, and pressed play. My mother's face filled the screen. She was in her bed, weak but clear-eyed, the date stamp in the corner confirming this was recorded exactly when Thomas said it was. I hadn't seen this video. I hadn't known it existed. Watching her now, seeing her alive again, even if only digitally, made my chest ache with fresh grief. My name is Elizabeth Ann Morrison, Mom said, her voice weak but firm. I am recording this of my own free will, with no coercion or manipulation. I am of sound mind, as confirmed by my doctor, Dr. Patricia Chen, who is present during this recording. The camera panned slightly to show Dr. Chen, who nodded confirmation. Mom continued, I am making specific changes to my will today, based on what I know about my children's characters. Rebecca will claim that David manipulated me, that he turned me against her. This is false. The truth is, I've been watching both my children carefully for months, seeing how they handle stress, grief, responsibility. I've seen who shows up and who makes excuses. I've seen who does the hard work and who performs for an audience. She paused, catching her breath, then looked directly into the camera with an intensity that made it feel like she was speaking to each of us personally. Rebecca, if you're watching this, it means you've done exactly what I predicted. You've accused David of theft. You've turned the family against him. You've made yourself the victim and him the villain. And by doing this, you've proven that I was right to change my will. You've proven that you haven't learned the most basic lesson I tried to teach both my children. Integrity matters more than image. Rebecca collapsed back into her chair, sobbing openly now, her hands covering her face, her whole body shaking. On the screen, Mom's image softened slightly. I still love you, Rebecca. I always will. But I can't reward behavior that hurts others. I can't pretend that cruelty is acceptable if it comes wrapped in pretty packaging. Maybe losing this inheritance will teach you what my love apparently couldn't, that people aren't props in your story, that truth matters more than narrative, that kindness is more valuable than being right. The video ended. Thomas closed the laptop. Around the table, my relatives sat in stunned silence, finally confronting the reality they had been too comfortable to examine earlier. Uncle Paul's face had gone gray. Aunt Maria was crying quietly. The cousins wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. Rebecca lifted her face from her hands. Her makeup was destroyed, mascara running down her cheeks.
her carefully constructed appearance demolished by tears and shock and the devastating realization that her mother had seen through her completely. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I thought he really stole from her. I thought I was protecting her legacy." "You didn't think," I said, not cruelly but factually. "You didn't ask questions. You didn't look for evidence. You just assumed the worst because that's what you've always done. But she was my mother too. She loved me too. How could she do this?" "She did it because she loved you," I said. "Because she hoped that maybe, finally, you would learn something from losing something that mattered to you. She hoped you'd understand what it felt like to be on the receiving end of cruelty and assumption." Rebecca stared at me, her face a mask of devastation.
"You must be so happy right now. You finally won. You finally got to be the favorite." "I'm not happy," I said honestly. "I'm heartbroken. I'm heartbroken that our mother had to die believing her daughter was incapable of change. I'm heartbroken that you made her final months more stressful because she knew what you would do and had to prepare for it. I'm heartbroken that we're sitting here having this conversation instead of grieving together like siblings should." Trevor stood up, helping Rebecca to her feet. "We should go," he said quietly. "We should leave." "Yes," Rebecca said numbly. "We should leave." They walked toward the door. Rebecca paused when she reached me, looking down at where I sat, her eyes searching my face for something: forgiveness, understanding, absolution. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry, David." "I know," I said. "But sorry doesn't undo the damage. Sorry doesn't give me back my reputation or the relationship with family members who believed your lies. Sorry is just a word, Rebecca. What matters is what you do next." She nodded, tears streaming down her face, and left the conference room with Trevor supporting her weight. One by one, the other family members filed out. Uncle Paul stopped beside my chair, his hand hovering over my shoulder before dropping back to his side. "I should have asked questions," he said gruffly. "I should have given you the benefit of the doubt. Your mother was right. About everything." "Yes," I agreed. "She was." He left. They all left, until it was just Jen, Thomas, and me sitting in the conference room surrounded by legal documents and the ghost of my mother's final judgment. "There are logistics to discuss," Thomas said gently. "Transfer of property, account access, tax implications. But perhaps we could schedule another meeting for those details. I imagine you need time to process all of this." "Yes," I said. "Thank you, Thomas." He stood, gathering his papers, then paused. "For what it's worth, your mother talked about you often. She was proud of you, David, not because you were successful or impressive, but because you were kind. She said that was the rarest quality, the one that mattered most, and she was right." After he left, Jen and I sat in that conference room for a long time, holding hands, trying to comprehend everything that had just happened. "You inherited everything," Jen finally said. "The house, the money, everything." "I would give it all back to have her alive again," I replied. "I would give it all to Rebecca if it meant not having this divide in our family." "But you won't give it to Rebecca." "No," I agreed, "because Mom was right. Some lessons can only be learned through loss. Some people only change when they finally face consequences for their actions." "Do you think she'll change?" I thought about my sister, the beautiful, charismatic, cruel woman who had spent 40 years believing she deserved everything without earning anything, who had destroyed my reputation without hesitation, who had made our mother's final months more difficult because she couldn't imagine a world where she wasn't the center of attention. "I don't know," I said honestly. "But at least now she has the opportunity to try." The weeks following the will reading passed in a blur of paperwork and painful conversations. I hired a lawyer to handle the estate transfer, to navigate the complex process of converting Mom's assets into my name. The house needed to be appraised, accounts needed to be consolidated, taxes needed to be calculated and paid. I avoided Rebecca. She avoided me. The family fractured along predictable lines. Those who felt guilty for believing her lies, and those who blamed me for accepting the inheritance that should have been shared. Uncle Paul called me 3 weeks after the reading. "I've been thinking a lot about what your mother said, about how we all enabled Rebecca's behavior, how we always believed her version of events without question." "It's not your fault," I said, though we both knew that was only partially true. "It is, though, at least partly. We all saw the dynamic between you two growing up. We all noticed that Rebecca got more attention, more praise, more benefit of every doubt, and we all just accepted it because it was easier than confronting her or your mother about the imbalance." "What are you saying, Uncle Paul?" "I'm saying I'm sorry. I'm saying I should have stood up for you, both then and now. I'm saying your mother was braver than any of us, to finally tell the truth even if she had to wait until she was dying to do it." I thanked him for calling. We talked for another hour, carefully rebuilding a relationship that had been damaged by assumption and betrayal. Others called too: cousins who wanted to apologize, aunts who wanted to explain, friends of Mom who wanted to share memories and tell me how often she had spoken about me with pride. The one person who didn't call was Rebecca. I hired a cleaning company to help me sort through Mom's house, deciding what to keep, what to donate, what to throw away. It was brutal work, emotionally exhausting, each room full of memories and ghosts. I found the letter in Mom's nightstand, tucked beneath her Bible, in an envelope with my name written in her distinctive handwriting. It was sealed, with a note on the outside. David, open this only when you're alone. I waited until I was home, until Jen had gone to bed and the house was quiet, before I carefully opened that envelope and unfolded the pages inside. The letter was dated 2 days before Mom died, written in a hand that shook with weakness but remained determinedly legible. My dearest David, if you're reading this, then the will has been read, the truth has been revealed, and you're probably feeling a complicated mixture of vindication and grief. I know you well enough to know that winning against Rebecca, even when you deserved to win, doesn't make you happy. That's one of the things I love most about you, your capacity for compassion, even toward those who hurt you. I need to explain some things that I couldn't say in the video or the letter that was read at the will reading. Things that are just between us, mother and son. I failed, Rebecca. I see that clearly now, at the end, when clarity comes too late to matter. I failed her by never holding her accountable, by always making excuses for her cruelty, by treating her beauty and charisma as justifications for her behavior. I told myself I was being a supportive mother. Really, I was being a coward. I failed you too, in different ways. I didn't protect you from her. I didn't acknowledge how hard you tried, how much you sacrificed, how often you put others' needs ahead of your own. I took your kindness for granted, assumed you would always be there, always forgive, always understand. The inheritance isn't a reward, David. It's an apology. It's my way of saying, too late, that I see you now. I see what you've done, what you've been, what you've sacrificed. I see the good man you became despite my failures as a parent. Rebecca will hate you for this. She may never forgive you, even though you did nothing wrong. She may spend the rest of her life believing she was the victim, that you manipulated me, that justice was perverted. Let her believe it if she needs to. Some people can't handle truth. Some people need their narratives more than they need reality. But I want you to know something, son. I'm proud of you. Not because you're successful or wealthy or because you're inheriting my estate. I'm proud because you're kind, because you show up, because you do hard things without needing recognition or reward, because you stayed with me even when it was exhausting and heartbreaking and thankless. You were exactly the son I needed, especially at the end. Use the inheritance however you think is right. Keep the house or sell it. Invest the money or give it all to charity. Whatever you decide, I trust you. I trust your judgment, your integrity, your heart. And David, forgive me. Forgive me for not protecting you better. Forgive me for not seeing clearly until it was almost too late. Forgive me for leaving you to deal with the mess I should have addressed years ago. I love you. I have always loved you. And if there's anything beyond this life, I'll be there. Finally brave enough to say out loud all the things I should have said while I was alive. Your mother, Elizabeth. I read that letter 3 times. Tears streaming down my face, grief and love and forgiveness mixing together into something too complex to name. Mom had been wrong about one thing. The inheritance wasn't an apology. Apologies come from people who still have time to change, to do better. This was more like a confession, a final acknowledgement of truths she had been too afraid or too comfortable to speak while she was alive. But she had been right about everything else. About Rebecca, about the family dynamics, about what mattered and what didn't. I folded the letter carefully, placed it back in its envelope, and added it to the small box of keepsakes I was creating: photos, her wedding ring, the quilt her grandmother had made, pieces of a life that couldn't be measured in dollars or property deeds. The next morning, I called my lawyer. I want to set up a trust fund, I said, for Rebecca's children, if she has any, not accessible to Rebecca herself, just to any children she might have in the future, for their education, their needs. That's generous, considering everything that happened, my lawyer observed. It's not generosity. It's doing what Mom would have wanted, taking care of family, even the difficult parts of family. I also established a scholarship fund at the hospice organization that had cared for Mom, designated for families who couldn't afford end-of-life care. I set up monthly donations to the church where Mom had volunteered. I made sure her legacy was about more than the conflict and pain of her final months. And I put the house on the market. I couldn't live there. Every room held too many memories, too many ghosts, but I could ensure it went to a family who would love it, fill it with new memories, new love. The house sold in 3 weeks to a young couple with 2 kids and a dog. They sent me a thank you note saying they could feel the love in every room, that they would take care of it. I hoped they were right. I hoped Mom would approve. 6 months after the will reading, I received a letter from Rebecca. Not a text, not an email, but an actual handwritten letter delivered through the mail. David, I don't know how to begin this letter. I've written it 17 times, thrown away 17 versions, and this is attempt number 18. I keep trying to find the right words, the perfect phrasing, the way to make you understand what I'm feeling, but maybe there are no right words. Maybe some things are too broken for words to fix. Trevor and I are in counseling, separately and together. He says I need to face my patterns of behavior. My therapist says I have narcissistic tendencies and a deep-seated need for external validation. I say I'm a person who made terrible choices and hurt people I should have protected. I've spent 6 months trying to understand why I did what I did, why I immediately assumed you stole from Mom, why I spread that accusation before asking questions, why I needed everyone to see me as the victim and you as the villain. The truth is complicated and embarrassing. The truth is, I've always been jealous of you, which sounds insane because by every external measure, I've had the better life. But you had something I never did. Mom's genuine respect. She was proud of me for superficial things, my looks, my marriage, my social connections. She was proud of you for who you actually are. I couldn't stand that. I couldn't stand that you, my boring accountant brother who drives an old car and wears the same 3 suits, had something I couldn't buy or perform or manipulate my way into having. So when the opportunity came to tear you down, to prove that you weren't really better than me, I took it. I didn't even pause to consider if it was true. I just wanted it to be true because it would validate everything I believed about myself and you, and I was wrong. About everything. Mom's letter, the one Thomas read, destroyed me. Not because she cut me out of the will, but because she saw me so clearly, saw past all my carefully constructed pretenses to the ugly, insecure person underneath. She saw me and still loved me, but she didn't respect me. And I finally understand why. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know that. I'm not writing this letter to ask for it. I'm writing because you deserve to know that I understand what I did. I understand that my lies had consequences, that my need to be right destroyed your reputation and our relationship and Mom's peace in her final days. I understand that I can't take it back or make it right, but I'm trying to be better. I'm trying to learn the lessons Mom died hoping I would learn. I'm trying to become someone who asks questions before making accusations, who considers others' perspectives, who measures people by their character instead of their usefulness to me. It's hard. It's harder than anything I've ever done. Because it requires admitting that I've been wrong for 40 years, that most of my relationships have been shallow and transactional, that the person I've presented to the world is a carefully constructed fiction designed to hide an empty center. I heard you set up a trust fund for my future children. Trevor told me. He saw the paperwork when he was reviewing our finances. I cried for 3 hours after he told me. Not because of the money, but because it meant you still believed I could be more than what I showed you. You still believed I could be a good mother, even though I was a terrible sister. That's more grace than I deserve. I don't expect you to respond to this letter. I don't expect us to have a relationship again. I'm writing because I needed you to know that Mom's lesson finally landed. That her death, as painful as it was, taught me something I apparently couldn't learn any other way. I'm sorry. I know I already said that at the will reading, and you said sorry was just a word. You were right. So I'm trying to make it more than a word. I'm trying to make it a change, a transformation, a different way of being in the world. I don't know if I'll succeed, but I'm trying. And I want you to know that Mom was right about you. You are kind, you are steady, you are everything a son should be. And I'm sorry it took me 40 years and her death to see it. Rebecca, I read that letter sitting in my backyard, the same backyard where we'd had my modest wedding all those years ago, the wedding Rebecca had attended with a migraine and checked her phone through the whole ceremony. I thought about my sister, the beautiful, charismatic woman who had spent her whole life performing, finally stripped of pretense by our mother's posthumous judgment. I thought about Mom, dying with the burden of secrets and truths she had been too afraid to speak while alive. I thought about family, that complicated web of obligation and love and resentment and hope. And I wrote back. Not immediately. I waited 2 weeks, letting Rebecca's words settle, considering carefully what I wanted to say. Then I sat down and wrote, Rebecca, I received your letter. Thank you for your honesty. I'm not ready to rebuild our relationship. I may never be ready. The damage is too deep, the betrayal too fresh. Mom's will reading was 6 months ago, but the pain of what you did, the way you destroyed my reputation, turned our family against me, made Mom's final months more stressful, that pain is still raw. But I want you to know that I appreciate your letter. I appreciate your willingness to face what you did instead of making excuses or blaming circumstances. That's growth. That's the first step toward becoming someone different. Keep going to therapy. Keep doing the hard work of changing, not for me, not to earn my forgiveness, but for yourself and for the person you want to become. And yes, I set up the trust fund, not because I forgive you, but because I don't believe children should suffer for their parents' mistakes. If you have kids someday, they'll have educational support, not because of you, but despite you. Maybe someday we'll be able to have a relationship again. Maybe we'll be able to sit in the same room without all this pain and betrayal between us. But that day isn't today, and I don't know when it will be. Until then, I wish you well. I hope you learn what Mom tried to teach you. I hope you become the person you're trying to be. David. I mailed that letter and tried to move forward with my life. Tried to focus on my own family, Jen, our daughter Emma, the quiet life we had built together. Tried to use Mom's inheritance to do good things, help people, honor her memory in ways that mattered.